Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is I, your surprise host tonight, Mick Lateral, aka McLateral FF, on the Twitter. Yeets and greets, seasons eatings. We had some technical difficulties. Enough with the eat. Seriously though, we had some technical difficulties with the traditional waiver wire podcast that Herms and I do. We tried to figure out some workarounds. We still wanted to put out some waiver content, especially because we had actually done some research, shocking as that may seem. I know not typically the thing you come to the lateral for, but we did. So I figured this way we have some waiver content out there. Hopefully, I'll find a way to embed this video to a page on the website. But regardless, I'm here. I'm going to give you some waiver advice. It's probably going to be a quick show. If anyone happens to show up in the comments section, feel free and I'll answer any questions as long as I'm on here. But there isn't really an Ask Me Anything planned as part of this. So, this is what happens. So, week 10, here we are. Week 9 was crazy. Week 10, we thought it was going to be less crazy. It really I guess it's been a little less crazy, but it's still been insane. Especially as the Odell Beckham saga continues. We now have this Dalvin Cook news. We have the Aaron Rodgers thing that's still going on. The Cleveland Browns running back situation, everything's a mess. So luckily, we still have some good advice for you. So let's start, of course, with quarterbacks. And so for quarterback, if you're looking to still add someone at quarterback, the real obvious choice, and unfortunately, because he's the real obvious choice, he's only available in just over 50% of leagues, is Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz has been playing really well. He seems to be getting his legs back a bit. The Indianapolis offense is clicking. He is already past his he's got the bye in week 14. But he does have a great slate of games up until then. He's got Jacksonville. He's got Tampa Bay. He's got Houston. Yeah, there's a game against Buffalo. That's not the most exciting, but Carson Wentz is a really solid option out there. If you need to drop a quarterback, if there's man, I don't know, this guy's kind of taking up a spot. We kind of came to the conclusion that Derek Carr is probably the guy you can drop, though weirdly, he's also kind of one of the runner-ups as far as QB ads. He's been inconsistent. So if you think he's going to have a good game, again, Kansas City, not a great defense. So perhaps if you need a streaming option this week, Derek Carr, there could be worse options. But overall, we think that inconsistency is going to continue. Ryan Tannehill, another guy where it's Ryan Tannehill may end up being a really good quarterback in terms of NFL on-field performance and just it not quite click in terms of fantasy production. What's up, Ryan? Happy to have you on board. We're doing a little impromptu waiver show here. If you have any questions, feel free to say them in the comments. If you are still looking for someone to add and Carson Wentz isn't really available, Taysom Hill or Trevor Siemian could be a solid option, especially Taysom Hill. If he ultimately gets that starting role at some point this week, he has QB1 upside. Simeon's been playing surprisingly mistake-free football for the most part. So those are kind of your options there at quarterback. You should try and add Carson Wentz if at all possible. If not, take a look at one of the New Orleans quarterbacks. You could probably drop Derek Carr or Ryan Tannehill, but again, you don't have to. They're just the guys with the most inconsistencies that are still widely rostered. At running back, this one gets a little complicated because we've had some news developments that sort of affect this. So in terms of those news developments, Dearness Johnson might be the only healthy Browns running back of really any note. They brought Brian Hill to work out, but I might have added him to the practice squad. But within just a week's time, I wouldn't expect him to have a massive impact. And if Nick Chubb and Demetric Felton missed because of COVID, then it is the Dearness Johnson show. And we've seen that he's been able to actually handle the work this year. So I would trust him. So if he's available, he's now someone that definitely recommend adding. Another one along those lines, Alexander Madison, still fairly highly rostered, but there is a chance that he has been dropped in some of your leagues. So I would consider him with this Dalvin Cook news. I expect that Dalvin Cook will probably play given the complexities of that situation because there's just so much we don't know for sure yet, one way or the other. Um, but just in case he ends up on a commissioner's exempt list or anything like that, getting Madison is a really good idea. But if neither of those guys are available, Mark Ingram, pretty good option out there, especially with the news that Alvin Kamara possibly injured, though those rumors I don't think have been fully substantiated, so take that one with a grain of salt. But Mark Ingram has done well in his time back in New Orleans. He is familiar with that offense. He's familiar being the second fiddle to Alvin Kamara. He can handle this role. He can possibly handle even a slightly expanded role. And he's getting enough work right now that he's fantasy relevant, even if Alvin Kamara stays healthy. So he's someone who I would definitely consider. And then you can officially drop Mike Davis if you already haven't. Those of you who have listened to the Lateral since the pretty much the beginning of draft season would know that you just should have stayed away from Mike Davis anyway. But in case you didn't, you can go ahead and drop him now. It's officially over. It's Cordero Patterson's show for sure. Moving on to the wide receivers. There are really two names that stand out here. If Van Jefferson's still available, he is someone that we liked from previous weeks. Still like him for mostly the same reasons. Same with Rashad Bateman. Again, these are guys that are getting valuable targets for one reason or another. Van Jefferson in a high-powered offense, a bit of a deep threat, can translate into touchdowns. Seems to be the third target in that offense, though he's fighting that out with Tyler Higbee. Rashad Bateman might be the top target in his offense, weirdly enough. He's only seen his target go up. He went from 6 to 8. He hasn't seen less than 6 in a game, so he is definitely someone you should be looking at if you still need a wide receiver. And then Elijah Moore and Brandon Ayuk are also two wide receivers to take a look at for sure. Elijah Moore has just been absolute stud, wheels up, on fire the past couple of weeks. And hopefully the breakout has happened and this isn't going away, even with the nightmare's the correct term. The nightmare that the Jets offense is, especially that quarterback situation. Elijah Moore, if the breakout is here, you're not going to want to miss out on that. So Ryan has a question for us and his thoughts on Donovan Peoples-Jones. He is someone where I'm treating him kind of like Van Jefferson, in which I am interested. I am making some claims for him this week, potentially. And actually, there's definitely a couple leagues where I already have. I would put him just ahead of Van Jefferson. So the thing is, he could ultimately end up having the same role. It could be a deep threat role, only a couple targets a game. On the other hand, we know for a fact that Van Jefferson's role will remain around there. Donovan Peoples-Jones could be in for an even bigger role. The upside is there. I would still take Elijah Moore or Brandon Ayuk, who seems to be definitely trending in the right direction at this point, ahead of Donovan Peoples-Jones. I'd still probably take Rashad Bateman over Donovan Peoples-Jones, but then Donovan Peoples-Jones would be that fourth option for me. He is definitely someone to keep an eye out on as Cleveland moves on from Odell Beckham. He's a prospect that they have definitely liked. And if the running back situation is not good this week, they may need to pass the ball a bit more. And Baker certainly looks comfortable throwing the ball to Donovan Peoples-Jones. So it's a great question. And yeah, he's someone I could recommend, even if there are a couple guys I would take ahead of him. And if you need to pick up any of these guys, you got this wide receiver on your roster. Well, good news, you can drop him. That is Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd should not be on your roster anymore. There are other players that are more obvious drops, like Robbie Anderson, but I don't need to tell you that. You already kind of know that. He's barely rostered in 50% of leagues anymore anyway. Go drop Tyler Boyd. Get one of these higher upside guys. We know what Tyler Boyd is going to be in this Cincinnati offense, and it is just simply not good enough. And it's not a knock against the player. He's still a good player. He's doing what's asked of him. He's just not being asked much. Someone who is being asked a lot, though, and is playing beautifully, the Lateral, big fan of this man, and that is Pat Freiermuth. Pat Freiermuth, the Pittsburgh Steelers tight end, second-round draft pick, best tight end in the class, not named Kyle Pitts. You've heard it all. Well, here it is. Eric Ebron gone. Some issues potentially at wide receiver also allowed him to get in. Like they're relying a little more on James Washington, which, if I can throw to James Washington or I can throw to Pat Freiermuth, I might throw to Pat Freiermuth. And Ben Roethlisberger kind of agreeing. Pat Freiermuth has become an integral part of this offense. He is in tight end one territory, and his bye week is gone. You can play him the rest of the season. I've been saying to get him for a couple weeks. Hopefully you have. If you have not, go get him. If for some reason you cannot get him, Dan Arnold would be the second option. He has been getting a fair amount of targets. He is someone that Jacksonville traded for. This is a guy that NFL teams seem to like, that Jacksonville seems to like the tight end position. They've been looking for that answer all season long. And there's a chance they found it in Dan Arnold, who is scoring double-digit points in PPR leagues without having touchdowns. So he is definitely someone to consider if you still need a tight end. Yeah. Yeah, the Freiermuth, yeah, that ship sailed. You're going to have to pay up for that one. Now, granted, are you going to have to pay Kyle Pitts prices for him? Probably not. But again, Pitts still on another level. Let's be clear. Nothing crazy here. But Freiermuth is definitely someone you're going to want the rest of the season. I just cannot stress that enough. He has delivered as promised. Someone who has not, well, I would say not delivered as promised, but we weren't really expecting a ton from these guys. And that is Jared Cook, Los Angeles Chargers. He's, on the older side. They're using multiple tight ends. They're using tight ends we haven't even heard of. You just can't rely on his target share. He's largely touchdown upside. There are better options there. Again, I would rather have Pat Freiermuth or Dan Arnold over Jared Cook. Another one is Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry has been very touchdown dependent. The only caveat I would say with Hunter Henry is it's getting to the point where it's actually possibly a role for him. There's a certain point where it's like, okay, I get it. You want a guy that's not just like being seen as someone who it's like he's only being used in the red zone. He's only being used on this play. He's only being used on that play. But at a certain point, if they're being used for that every time it happens, there's worse things than that. So Hunter Henry, he's a guy that seems to be a target when they're looking at the end zone. But that being said, I still don't love having to rely on the touchdown dependency. So I would definitely take Pat Freiermuth over him, and I would probably take Dan Arnold over him as well. Ryan brings up a great point here. Logan Thomas is sneaky coming off of IR. The only thing I would say there is let's look at the rostership numbers. He is only available. He's only rostered in 47.1% of leagues. It's been going down a little. The bye probably didn't help with that. So yeah, honestly, if Logan Thomas is still out there, I would pick him up and I would drop Ricky Seals-Jones for him if you have him. I think we'd be seeing him as soon as this week. That's a great pick. I think I would still go Pat Freiermuth over Logan Thomas, but boy, that is close. I would definitely go Logan Thomas, though, over Dan Arnold. Again, not crazy. But I think Pat Freiermuth, this is a guy who was drafted by this team to fill a specific role in the offense, and we are seeing that role. Like, I don't think this is fool's gold at all. So his role in Pittsburgh's offense versus Logan Thomas's role in the Washington football team offense, I think I'd lean a little towards Freiermuth, especially because, I think the offense is running just a little better, even though Ben has not been great at quarterback. All right, moving on to the fun stuff, the reason why you're all here, why you're watching. Defense, special teams, and kickers. Then all joking aside, I actually do enjoy looking at the defense, special teams, and kickers ads and drops. And this week, you should be adding the Raiders. And hopefully you read my week too early waiver wire article last week when I dropped it. When I told you to add the Raiders, they still look good on defense. They're still scoring you some fancy points. And they get the Kansas City Chiefs this week, who have been a chitty. They've been a bad matchup. They really have, or rather, they've been a great one because they haven't been playing that well. Pat Mahomes is throwing interceptions. There is just something off with this Chiefs team, and the Raiders are poised to capitalize on it. They're widely available. They're probably available in your league. If you need a streaming defense this week, I would go get the Raiders. Tennessee Titans is a good one if you're maybe looking for something like a little more season long, a little more set and forget. They are definitely a great option as well. They have been performing really well as of late. And if that continues, sky's the limit. I just have concerns because it was a defense that started off the season pretty cold. But it could be for real. I certainly wouldn't stay completely away. I think there's potential there for sure. Dropping DSTs is weird because it's very matchup dependent. It really depends. Like, who do you have? Who's available on waivers? Like, if you have the New England Patriots defense, but like the Buffalo Bills is somehow out there on waivers, then Pats have been a good defense, but you can probably drop them to go get the Bills. Like, it's so situational. However, I think there's a couple things that we can state fairly definitively at this point. You don't need to stash the Ravens defense because of their elite past. This team has not been playing well in terms of fantasy production specifically. They've had negative points multiple weeks. It's just not the same defense. You don't need to stash them just because of that name brand recognition. And you can kind of say the same thing about the Niners, though you've probably been less likely to stash the Niners. The Niners have some potential favorable matchups coming down the line, but again, it's just you shouldn't really be stashing either of these teams because you go, oh, well, they've been elite in the past. Surely they'll continue to be an elite defense. Like, no. If there's a better matchup available out there for you to exploit, go ahead, do that, drop them. Moving on to kicker. Coming to an end here. If you have any questions, feel free to get them in. It's gone pretty well. It's been fun. Almost makes you consider doing it again, but rest assured won't be the case. We will be bringing the podcast as soon as we can, hopefully, fingers crossed, next week. And we still have a week 10 preview podcast that we are hoping to record tomorrow night and then drop on Thursday as usual. So keep an eye out for that. There were some unfixable technical difficulties with this waiver wire podcast, and we just couldn't in good conscience put it out. But luckily, I kept the notes. You have the research that Herms and I did, and it's coming to you right here in the form of a Chris Boswell recommendation at kicker. If you read my week too early waiver wire article, you would know Boswell doing pretty well. If you watched the game last night, Boswell doing pretty well. He was a guy that people didn't really want to pick up because of the concussion issue. And it's like, okay, well, you should pick him up because people are avoiding that. Like, as a concussion, he doesn't seem to be having complications with it. He's probably going to come back. Go get this guy. And sure enough, like, it panned out this past week. And I believe with his matchup against the Detroit Lions coming up, it's going to pan out again. So I would definitely recommend getting Chris Boswell. Again, kickers for drops, it's a bit more of a situational, a bit more of a matchup based thing. Really depends how, galaxy brain you want to get with it. However, the one thing I would suggest is really more of an anti-recommendation. Don't play Mason Crosby if Aaron Rodgers isn't the quarterback. So this Sunday, Aaron Rodgers might not be the quarterback. So that means Mason Crosby shouldn't be on your roster, period. He's not good enough to stash, and he's not good enough on that offense to play if Aaron Rodgers isn't the quarterback. Like, I'm sorry, that offense does not run well with Jordan Love at center for whatever reason it is. I'm personally not a big fan of the talent myself, so I am tending to believe that's a big part of it, but some people say it's a bad offensive line. There's some credence to that. Either way, it's not good, and you don't want any part of it. So do not play Mason Crosby without Aaron Rodgers. And with that, that is the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for paying attention. This will be up on our YouTube page. It'll be in our Twitter feed. So go check that out if you need some waiver recommendations here tonight before things start to process tomorrow morning. And with that, hopefully you will be hearing my voice and Herm's voice again Thursday when our Week 10 preview drops on Spotify. That's the show. This is, the kind of the awkward part where you just kind of